Florida's tourism numbers don't just look confusing, they look impossible. In the same week, 3 separate reports came out and every single one told a different story. The first one says air travel is way down with empty seats flying in and out of the United States. The second from Tampa Bay admits that revenue is falling, international visitors are skipping town, and Canadian tourism in particular has dropped by nearly half. But then in that very same report, the mayor turns around and says Tampa just had its best June ever. And the third report, it claims Florida tourism is actually breaking records and that 34 million people visited the state between April and June. So which is it? Are tourists disappearing or are they arriving in record numbers? The truth is, all of these claims can't be right at the same time. And that's why today we're breaking it down step by step. We'll look at the airline data, the local business reports, and the official state press releases. By the end, you'll see exactly why these numbers don't add up and why Florida's tourism math makes no sense. Before we get started, a quick ask. If you enjoy videos that cut through the spin and dig into what's really going on, hit the like button and subscribe. It helps get this information out to more people, and it really does make a difference. All right, let's get into it. The first big red flag comes straight from a travel expert, Peter Greenberg, who has been covering this industry for decades. When he was interviewed right after Labor Day, he didn't sugarcoat what's happening. Both domestic and international travel are sharply down. Airlines are running flights with large numbers of empty seats, not just coming into the United States, but also leaving it. That's unusual. Normally, airlines cut routes or pack flights to make sure they're profitable. But right now, the planes are still flying and they're not full. The clearest proof of this, ticket prices. We're seeing round-trip fares to London or Paris as low as $258. To put that into perspective, that is cheaper than some domestic flights inside the US. For example, you could end up paying more to fly to Des Moines than to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. Deals that extreme only exist when there is far more supply than demand. Greenberg even pointed out that the problem isn't temporary. These deals are expected to last until just before Thanksgiving and then come back again after early January. That means the airlines themselves are preparing for a long stretch of weak demand. So, when you hear a mayor or a tourism board official say, "It's our best summer ever," just remember what the airline industry is quietly telling us. People aren't traveling like they used to, and the empty seats don't lie. If you want to see how shrinking tourism really looks, just take a look at Las Vegas. The city is practically built on tourism. So, when visitors stop coming, the cracks start showing fast. Reports out of Nevada show numbers are down anywhere between 9 and 17%. That may not sound huge at first, but in a city that welcomes tens of millions of people every year, that's a massive drop. For local hotels, casinos, and restaurants, it means fewer people filling rooms, eating meals, and spending money at slot machines. And here's the part that really tells the story. Hotels have quietly started removing their infamous resort fees. If you've ever stayed in Las Vegas, you know those charges. They can run about $45 a day, and you don't get much for them. Usually, some Wi-Fi, a gym pass, maybe a bottle of water. Multiply that by a 5-day stay and you're talking about more than $200 in hidden costs. Now, when hotels suddenly decide to drop those fees, that's not generosity, that's desperation. Las Vegas is often a good bellwether for the rest of the country because it's so dependent on tourism. If visitors are pulling back there, you can bet similar trends are happening in places like Florida, even if officials don't want to admit it. Dropping resort fees is essentially waving a white flag, a clear signal that the demand just isn't there. Now, let's move over to Florida, where Tampa Bay gives us one of the strangest sets of numbers yet. On the one hand, the data is pretty clear. Hotels in the area saw about 40% fewer Canadian visitors compared to the previous year. That drop alone translated into a 35% revenue loss. On top of that, tourists from the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and Germany also skipped the region, continuing a trend that's being seen across the entire United States. But then comes the spin. At a tourism board meeting, local officials admitted those declines, but insisted it wasn't time to sound the alarm. Clearwater's mayor even went as far as saying their beaches were as attractive to tourists as ever. Think about that. If international visitors are down and revenues are down, how exactly is everything better than ever? That doesn't add up. Here's another contradiction. Visit Florida's own statewide numbers show 100,000 fewer Canadians visited the state this year. Yet in Tampa Bay, a local business owner claimed they had the best June ever. Which version are people supposed to believe? The declining revenues or the cheerful sound bites? This is where the problem lies. Reports acknowledge the declines in international travel, but quickly pivot to a positive message, hoping viewers won't notice the contradictions. For people working in hotels and restaurants, the drop in customers is obvious. The numbers are down, no matter how many speeches try to say otherwise. One of the clearest patterns in all these reports is the steep drop in international visitors. Countries that used to send millions of travelers to the United States, Canada, Germany, Sweden, the United Kingdom, are now turning away. The reasons aren't a mystery. Political tensions, tariffs on goods, stricter policies at the border, and the overall cost of travel have made the U.S. far less attractive than it once was. Travelers are simply choosing other destinations. The financial impact is staggering. Earlier in the year, estimates suggested the U.S. would lose about $12.5 billion in spending from international tourists. By July, that projection had already more than doubled to $29 billion. And if trends continue, that number is only going to climb higher. For context, that is money that would have flowed directly into hotels, restaurants, attractions, and small businesses in states like Florida. Meanwhile, tourism boards keep pointing to big attractions like the opening of Epic Universe in Orlando as proof that international demand is rebounding. But the reality is more complicated. Yes, a new theme park may bring in some extra visitors, but it doesn't erase the broader decline. Small businesses describe ghost towns, not record crowds. So, when officials insist the state is breaking records, it raises a simple question. How can Florida be thriving if international tourism, a critical source of new money, is falling this sharply? Here's where things get really strange. While local businesses and even airlines are pointing to fewer visitors, Florida's official tourism agency, Visit Florida, reported a record-breaking 34.4 million visitors between April and June. They proudly called it the best second quarter the state has ever had. On paper, it sounds like a huge win. But when you compare that claim with what small business owners are experiencing, the story starts to unravel. Restaurant owners, shopkeepers, and hotel managers across Florida have said this past summer felt like a ghost town. Many reported sales down by 30% or more. Some even had to shut their doors entirely. That doesn't line up with the idea of a record quarter. After all, if tens of millions more people were suddenly flocking to Florida, wouldn't local businesses be thriving? Wouldn't they be hiring more staff, opening new locations, or at least reporting steady revenues? One possible explanation is that theme parks and major attractions are inflating the numbers. A massive opening like Epic Universe in Orlando can draw huge crowds, but those visitors often spend most of their money inside the park, not in the surrounding community. So, while the state can point to record attendance at the gates, the economic benefits aren't spreading evenly. In other words, Florida may be celebrating record highs on paper, but for many small businesses, the reality feels like record lows. Another point that keeps popping up in these reports is the idea that tourism is saving Florida families money. Visit Florida claims that tourism pumps nearly $40 billion into state and local tax revenue every year. According to their math, that supposedly saves each Florida household about $2,000 annually. On the surface, it sounds like a great deal. Who wouldn't want to save that kind of money? But here's where the spin comes in. The bulk of those dollars are coming from domestic travelers, people from New York, Atlanta, or Washington, D.C. who pack up the car or book a short flight to Orlando. That's not new money flowing into the economy. It's money already inside U.S. borders being shuffled from one pocket to another. Yes, it helps local hotels and theme parks, but it doesn't generate the same kind of economic boost that international visitors bring. International travelers spend differently. They tend to stay longer, book more nights in hotels, and spend more money on food, shopping, and entertainment. When those visitors disappear, you can't just replace them with the same number of domestic tourists and expect the math to work out. So, while the state boasts about billions in tax revenue and family savings, the bigger picture is less flattering. Without strong international tourism, Florida is leaning heavily on numbers that don't actually add new wealth. It's clever messaging, but it doesn't make the contradictions go away. By now, the contradictions should be jumping out. On one side, we have airlines openly admitting that demand is down with empty seats flying back and forth across the Atlantic. We have Tampa Bay hotels reporting a 40% drop in Canadian visitors and a 35% loss in revenue. We have small business owners describing their summer as a ghost town with sales falling by 30%. All of that paints a clear picture. Tourism is struggling. But then in the very same week, we hear a mayor insisting it was the best June ever. We hear Visit Florida reporting a record 34.4 million visitors between April and June. And we hear officials claiming that billions in tax revenue are pouring in, Saving families $2,000 a year. These things can't all be true at the same time. If fewer international visitors are coming, and if local revenues are falling, how can the state be setting records? If airlines are offering rock-bottom fares just to fill seats, why would local officials claim demand has never been higher? It doesn't add up. The only logical conclusion is that some of these numbers are being spun for political or marketing purposes. For everyday Floridians, the disconnect is obvious. The official story says the state is thriving while the lived reality for small businesses tells a very different tale. And that's why Florida's tourism numbers just don't make sense. So what's the takeaway? Florida's official story says record highs while airlines, local businesses, and international travel data point in the opposite direction. The contradictions are impossible to ignore, and at some point the truth will catch up. For now, it's up to us to look past the spin and pay attention to the real numbers. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.